Thank you. As the next panelist, we have Pallavi, who will be moderating and inviting the next panelist. We do have two panelists, I believe two panelists who are virtual, and Denise is here. So a big shout out to Denise and Stan for all that they did to support the Thai DC conference. I mean, one email to Denise and it was like, we were able to, and she's been supporting us for many years now, so thank you so much. And by the way, Antonia, I'm one of those examples who is graduating into a mid-tier, and for me, the SBA has been amazing. Just the amount of help we've gotten, so thank you so much. Thank you.
I want to add to that, my first ever contract was at SBA. I knew nothing. I was literally fresh off the boat. And the amount of nurturing I got, I mean, obviously there's struggles all along the way. But if the person on the other side can explain things to you in a nurturing environment, it just gives you confidence when you're unsure. So I am really grateful to SBA for everything. Yeah, thank you. So we'll start the online now?
Yeah, they'll be brought into the live.
Yeah, you can introduce and they'll get them.
Oh, okay. All right. Do I have to hold this? Yes. Okay. All right. Good morning, everybody. I hope you're all up and alert, especially after Antonio's talk. I think it really brought us up out of our slumber mode that we already stay in during the COVID world, these hours of the morning. But I'm very happy to be here. I owe a lot to SBA, and I owe a lot to the small business offices and all the agencies. Today, I work across maybe 40 different agencies in the federal government, and the OSDBU office is the lifeline. Because I'm not a big company. I don't know how to navigate. I don't know how to create influence. I don't know how to lobby. And my first point of entrance to any agency is approaching that office. So there's a lot I have learned, and I hope during this session, a lot you can learn, and please feel free to ask questions. I have some generic questions, but it'll really be interesting if everybody out here will pose their questions. With that, I'm very, very honored to host today. First of all, thank you for being here, Denise. Really appreciate you taking the time. And virtually, we have Brian. Good morning, Brian. And we have Darlene. And I'll let you all three introduce yourselves. Since you're the only male in the room, Brian, why don't we start with you?
Well, thank you. Good morning to everyone. And I just wanted to personally thank everyone for the opportunity to just participate on this panel discussion with, the other senior leaders within OSDBU. Just a couple of things regarding my introduction. An important role or mission within Treasury is to stimulate the growth of the nation's economy through job growth, employment opportunities, and business opportunities. At Treasury OSDBU, we help to support that mission by increasing contracts to small businesses within the U.S. economy. So a big part of what we do is encourage, the small business program officers, the procurement teams, coordinate with Treasury officials to make sure that, the small businesses are getting the maximum opportunities within Treasury, which brings me to my role. My role in Treasury, I serve as the team lead for policy and compliance. So what I do each year is reach out to, again, the small business program offices, the acquisition teams. I take a look at the FAR, the Small Business Act, the NDAA, and other rules and regulations from small business authorities. And I make sure that, our small business policy and guidance handbook is up to date, and I disseminate that information to the different program offices within Treasury. Just some general information about, Treasury's small business program. So in FY 2021, Treasury spent a little over $9.3 billion in awarding contracts to small businesses. Over the past 5 years, Treasury has received at least an A or A+ on its scorecard ratings to the SBA. Over the past 5 years, Treasury has met at least 4 out of 5 of its small business goals through its socioeconomic categories. And for those who don't know about the socioeconomic categories, they're, of course, HUBZone, service disabled, veteran-owned small businesses, small disadvantaged businesses, and women-owned small businesses. a couple of things regarding our particular office in Treasury Osnabu. We do not purchase or buy any supplies or products from small businesses. However, we do provide oversight to the 11 bureaus that report up to Treasury headquarters where I work. Within those 11 bureaus, you have the IRS, which we all know about. You also have Bureau of Engraving and Printing, and you have Mint, and you also have the Office of Comptroller and Currency, just to name a few of the bureaus that report up to Treasury headquarters, which Treasury Osnabu is under. A couple other things that I wanted to mention is that I also serve as the team lead for Treasury's forecast of opportunities, and I'm sure I'll get a chance to talk about that a little bit more in detail as the discussions go along. And then also I serve as the coordinator for the Service Disabled Veteran-Owned Small Business Program. So that's my introduction, and I thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Darlene, can we move on to you?
Of course. So good morning, everyone. I wish I could have been there too. Hi, Denise. Hi, Brian. Good morning, everyone. I am Darlene Bullock. I am the Osnabu director for the Department of Homeland Security. And so, I mean, just that name alone is a huge, huge task, huge undertaking. I am actually the second Osnabu director. I know many of you know my predecessor, Kevin Boshears, who I was his deputy director for 5 years. And so now I am the director, and I am, we are all still committed to small business. I have different ideas, different things that we're doing, different processes we're putting in place. So small businesses are in great hands with me at the helm and with the leadership at DHS. So a little bit about DHS, my role, similar to what Brian and Denise are going to talk about, what their offices do. We all do similar things, to get to a common goal, to maximize opportunities for small businesses, prime, and subcontracting. We just probably have different ways we do it in the magnitude that we do it. The DHS Osnabu, my position is very involved in all things business, not just small business at the department, ensuring that small businesses have those opportunities. That's the job. That's what I take very seriously by the Small Business Act, what I'm mandated to do. I used to be a contracting officer for 20 years. So I also have that background of, understanding what some of these contract officers have to go through, what they do, the way they speak, et cetera. So I think I have a unique place in the Osnabu world because of that. DHS, we have about 10 operational procurement offices, 9 that report to FPDS. 1 does a lot of classified work, so you won't see their information in FPDS. Homeland Security, we're affected every day, on whoever came here by flight, right? Customs and Border Protection, if things are coming in, even buying things. The United States Secret Service, which used to be a part of Treasury, is part of Homeland. U.S. Coast Guard, who also has a military function. So we have law enforcement entities, ICE, so forth. So it's a huge undertaking. We have about 1,400 contracting people, not to count the program offices, et cetera. So, the processes in place have to be, very specific. We're kind of like a well-oiled machine a little bit. Brian talked about the A's in a row. DHS has 12 A's in a row with 5 A pluses in a row. And we're confident we're going to have 13 or 21 and another A plus. And we foot stomp all the time our commitment to small business. And it's not something that we just talk about, we do. And so I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have and talk about what DHS is doing, what we're going to do, what the Osnabu's vision is of in 22 and beyond. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Darlene. And now for my partner in crime on stage, Denise, your introduction.
Well, I am so glad to be here to join you on the stage, so we're just not all images on the screen. Good morning, everyone. I am thrilled to be here, not once, not even twice, but apparently this is my 3rd time with you all. Imagine that. Well, obviously, because I'm so delighted to join you, I think this is such a great organization and they're great members. Special thanks to Manish, who supported our participation and did a lot of the behind-the-scenes coordination, and for all of the organizers for including us. I'm actually surprised to see SBA in attendance this morning, but I'm thrilled that you guys are here. Antonia and I are great friends and partners. I'm actually a refugee from SBA, and Antonia and I worked very closely together. And is it Derek from Mentor Pro? Yeah, so Derek has supported a lot of our outreach at EPA. So yes, I am with the Environmental Protection Agency, and I am the director for the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization. And EPA has been in the news for a little bit, particularly under this administration. So we know the mission of EPA is to protect human health and the environment. And OSDBU really is an integral part of supporting that mission. And we do so primarily in the area of advancing and promoting the interests of small businesses. And we do that not only for your procurement and business interests, which is what I'm sure many of you are very much interested in, but also we serve a role in providing regulatory and environmental compliance assistance to small businesses. So unlike some of the other OSDBUs that we have in the federal government, we actually have an arm that's committed, we call it the Asbestos and Small Business Ombudsman, and they basically ensure that small businesses don't face unreasonable and onerous regulatory burden, and also to provide assistance with technical compliance with the excuse me, the environmental regulations. But I know you're interested in the component that focuses on providing you all procurement opportunities. And so there we do a lot of great work. I am so pleased to be joining the other panelists who are among the best and the brightest for OSDBU based on their scorecard historical grades. And like many of them, EPA is one of just a handful of agencies that has earned at least an A for the last 12 years on the scorecard. So we're proud of that record, as many of my other colleagues on the panels are as well. In terms of just real quickly to give you a sense of what our contracting activity looks like, we're one of the small, well, we're a mid-size agency, so we don't procure on the level that we've heard from like a DHS and even Treasury. On average, we do about 1.6 billion every year. And our small business contracting portion of that is in the range of about 40%, which is pretty substantial. And that covers the range of all the procurements I'm sure you're all familiar with. We do a lot, obviously, remedial, environmental support work, those types of things, but certainly professional services and computing. So like the rest of SAM, happy to talk a little bit more as we drill down to the trends and practices across the government and share our insight with you all.
Thank you for that. Now, I know we have very limited time, so I won't ask every panelist every question, though you want to know about every agency, but you'll have time to interact with them later. But the first question I want to ask, which I think is on the forefront of everybody's mind, with POTUS announcing that a lot of work is going to go small, and maybe Brian, you can answer this one. What is the emerging trend in your agency? What are you doing? Because I heard SBA say that small is not that large and it's decreasing. Will we see a trend change in that? Brian, we can start with you if you would like to take that question.
Yes, I think so. Also, as the team lead for managing our small business goaling on a month-to-month basis, there's a couple of things that's going on regarding our small business goaling. Number one, I mentioned earlier that we met 4 out of 5 of our small business goals. However, we did not meet our hub zone goal. So one of the things we're focusing now on is strategizing and looking at creative ways in which we could, invite, our hub zones to our, vendor outreach sessions. And we're looking at creative ways of coordinating with our acquisition teams and program offices to craft up requirements that would where we can isolate hub zone businesses, at least to apply and to win contracts within the federal government. But also the other trend that's going on with Treasury is the executive order on equity, equality, and racial advancement. That's a huge trend within our office. Treasury's Small Business Program Office has been asked to take a lead as to look at the barriers of the small businesses that are emerging into the economy and to see what we can do regarding strategizing approaches to help them to benefit more with winning opportunities within Treasury. Treasury has, developed an executive leadership team to kind of really hone in on those small businesses, particularly the ones that are struggling and, really trying to find contracts within the federal government, but, Treasury in particular, and to see, exactly what we can do to help those small businesses out. But more information regarding, what we're doing with the executive order is forthcoming. The other thing that Treasury has taken a leadership on is the HBCU leadership. The HBCU initiative to help the HBCUs to gain more contracting opportunities within the federal space. So we're looking at developing vendor outreach programs around that to provide more support to HBCUs, more technical support to explain the federal government environment and how they can get on certain contracting vehicles and how they can be more successful at winning contracts within the federal government. So those are just, a few things, a few trends that I've noticed, within Treasury, where we're trying to just play a more active role in supporting the small business community.
And you're right, Brian, on the HBSU, even with the CIO SP4, there was a big initiative to support the HBSUs. So we see that trend, and that really got awareness among all of us of the talent that stays there. But with that, Darlene, a question for you. What are the opportunities that you see coming out of your agency that might be targeted to large and small? Because even if it's large, we can team up, but we could plan ahead if we knew what was coming out.
Well, we have, so many different things and different missions. So DHS actually has an acquisition planning forecast system. So we call it APFS. So it's been modeled a few times. If you look at GSA system, forecast system is modeled after the DHS's system, which has been quite successful. It's a living document. So, every procurement over 250,000, absent from exercise of options, et cetera, is listed in the APFS. And it, like I said, it's a living document. So what you see there today may not be what you see 2 months from now, because it has to go through certain processes through the requirements office who inputs it all the way through to release into the system. So you'll see a lot of things with IT, of course. Some of the top spend items for DHS for last fiscal year was surprisingly security guard and patrol services, is like the #2 next code. The IT, of course, was about $3 billion in spend. Was about the top 2 next codes. Administrative support services is another one. Engineering services is also a top next code for the department. So you'll see a lot of continuing of those type of acquisitions. And I did want to add to, what Brian had said before, is that DHS, we have, part of what you'll see is strategy. And Brian, it was a great word he used, because you have to create these vehicles within your own department or used vehicles, that are small business friendly, that have small business pieces to it. You can't get to the small business obligation if you don't use the small business contracts or create those. And at DHS, we have indeed done that. And we've done that even when Antonio talked about category management a bit, trying to use vehicles that have small business functional areas or small businesses are awarded, like a CISP3 small or so forth. So VETS 2, 8A stars. So those are the things that you'll see out of DHS used more frequently. We do have, issues with CISP3 and some of the ordering periods. So FYI to NIH about, what's the status of that, because that does affect all of us across the space. DHS for 22 met all of its small business and socioeconomic goals. including HubZone, which we were over 5.5%. And we don't do that just by, you don't throw a dart to the wall. It's all strategy, it's all planning, it's all process, it's all making sure that we make those opportunities available to HubZone businesses. So you just have to keep trying to do it. And we've been quite successful in that area. So the forecast, anyone can go and look at that. The next codes are things that we buy all the time. Specific procurements, are things that, I can't really discuss because a lot of them I'm deeply involved in to what degree or stage they're in. But of course, IT, a lot of cloud procurements. I think people are familiar with our First Source 3 procurement is for our IT products and some ancillary services. That procurement has already started. A lot of people are interested in PAX 3, which will be our service disabled, better known small business procurement for administrative, engineering type services. We're working on that now. So we totally, again, set aside for service disabled. So that's one of the things that we're working on and you'll see more information about too. But just check the forecast to see what interests you and what by component. You can search it by NAICS code, you can search different ways and just see what your company would be interested in. And then most certainly you can reach out to the small business specialists that are listed or my office, the Oswald office.
Thank you, Darlene. Denise, put you in the hot seat now. So you've come here for 3 years in a row and you know all of us small businesses. The one struggle we have is how do we approach your office, right? In any agency. And what is obnoxious, what is the right amount, and what is not doing enough. So guide us all on, what's the best way and when is the best time?
That's such a great question. And I can get a little passionate and emotional about it because we do get a lot of calls from small businesses.
I'm sure.
And what sometimes is disappointing is the lack of preparedness on the part of the small businesses. And so that tends to be a little bit of a pet peeve for me. So OSDBUs are here to support you, to advocate on your behalf, to connect you with the opportunities. But we're a small, and oftentimes you hear people say a mighty group, so we have limited resources. So to really leverage your time and opportunities with us so that you can get your biggest bang for your buck, before you pick up the phone and call us, you want to do a little bit of research. And the research would include what Darlene suggested, looking at our acquisition forecast, which every agency is required to publish for the benefit of small businesses. That's always a good place to start, to see if there are any opportunities that align with the services and products that you offer. But for the overachievers, you might want to do a little bit perusing of the agency website to see what else is afoot that could probably match up with an area that you're offering. For example, if you see strategic objectives, if you see mission objectives and those types of things identified, that's familiarizing yourself with the work of the agency, what's existing, and what's coming up on the horizon. So that when you do connect with the OSDBU office, you can have a really meaningful conversation on where you can fit. So those are just some preliminary steps in just doing the groundwork to have that conversation with us. And then once you do, what you're going to want to find out and really inform us is what your value-added capabilities are. And in doing that, you really want to focus on what's more important, because if you give us a laundry list, sometimes it makes us suspicious that you can really do all of that breadth of work as a small business, but it also makes it more difficult to see where we can plug you in. So pinpoint those areas that would be most valuable based on the research that you've done. And then we will assist you in identifying those program officials that we'd want to connect you with so they too can become familiar with your goods and products so that they will be able to feel comfortable as they're structuring their acquisitions that they could make it more small business friendly.
So Denise, a question here. So if you can, does the small business office actually connect you to that program office and you have a chance to talk to the technical stakeholders of an upcoming, albeit a little far, bid?
So that's one of the things that we can do. And every OSDBU is different. At EPA, we really do see ourselves as the gatekeepers.
Okay.
And so if there are opportunities, part of our role, as I said earlier, is to advocate and promote. And in doing that, we're advocating for the small businesses, but it's also persuading programs who are still sometimes reluctant to go small businesses because they want to stay with their incumbent. And so one of the things that I've been really advocating with my own folks at the agency is there's no better way to do your market research rather than just relying on a sources sought or a request for information than meeting with the small businesses, getting comfortable with them, probing them on what their capabilities are. If appropriate, conducting demos. And so we've done a lot of that, and I think it's been very valuable, not only for the small businesses, but also for the agency as well. Not only in determining how they will structure the requirement, but in fact what their requirement is. Sometimes they lack that market intelligence to see where there are innovative ways to meet their needs. And so all of those conversations and engagement with vendors, I think, really help move the needle in so many different ways.
That's so nice to hear. And Brian, I want to build on that question and go to you, because that really is a key question in all our minds. A lot of times we'll meet with the OSDBU office, but that connection to the technical stakeholders don't happen, and bigger companies, you know, you name any of these Fortune 100, 500 companies, already have connections. They can meet, they can pitch, they can submit white papers, and they can bring industry knowledge and write industry knowledge and help shape that procurement. Whereas smaller businesses, at least in my opinion or in my know-how, don't have that opportunity. So Brian, in your agency, how does that work?
Well, that's a good question, because a lot of times, as you mentioned, you know, the large businesses already have that inside connection. So, you know, a couple of things regarding, you know, our agencies. Our agency, we do a lot with vendor outreach. So we do a lot with vendor outreach internally and externally. So internally, we'll typically have about 4 vendor outreach sessions where we, you know, connect the small businesses to our program offices, RS, BEP, MENT, as I already mentioned, OCC, Bureau of Physical Services, and Alcohol Tobacco Bureau as well. So we established those outreach sessions specifically so that the small businesses can come in and conversate with our small business professionals and program managers on how to do business with Treasury. Another way which small businesses can connect with Treasury is they can connect via our online tool. And I'll quickly, you know, give them a rundown of how to do that, because I think it's important. They can access www.treasury.gov, and then from there, they'll see a tab that says Policy Issues. They can click on that, and from there, they can scroll down to the Small Business Program, and then they can click on the OSDBU. And when they click on the OSDBU link, it will open them up to a wealth of information regarding our small business program. I mean, they can access our forecasts. They can access information regarding how to do business with Treasury. They can access our vendor outreach tool. They can access what we got called is a small business electronic capability statement. System, and they can register into that system, load in their capability statement, and then receive announcements from Treasury Small Business Office regarding upcoming events, regarding what's going on in Treasury, regarding helpful hints for small businesses. So they can reach out via our vendor outreach sessions. They can also reach out via our online tool to get access to our small business program office. And also, I didn't mention, within our online tool, we have a section called Point of Contacts. And when they click on Point of Contacts, they'll get 2 lists. One list is for the Office of the OSDBU, where I work, in which Donna Ragusi is the director. And they'll get a list of the business analysts, including myself, to get our email, our telephone numbers, and a brief overview of what we do, which is very important. The other list that they'll get is a list of all of the small business specialists within the Department of Treasury, which is huge. Because if you log into our forecast system and you see something interesting that you like, if it doesn't have a point of contact, you can always reach back out to our small business specialist to find out more information. And then finally, I just want to say that even though vendor outreach is huge for Treasury, for right now, we're all forced to go online virtually and conduct our matchmaking sessions and our one-on-one meetings all has to be done virtually now. And one of the things that I'm particularly interested in today's discussion and to hear back from the small businesses is how well we're doing with connecting with small businesses via our virtual platforms. That's going to be huge as we go forward and to move forward into FY 2022. So thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And that's a really big concern what Brian left us with. And I want to build on that with Darlene. It's a COVID world. Agencies are not, a lot of agencies, I work heavily with census. We are shut till September of next year. So in this COVID world, how does one get FaceTime? Even if it's Zoom time, right? How do you know you don't walk the halls anymore? What do you have in place, or what advice do you have for small businesses to kind of network, get to know both your office as well as technical stakeholders of upcoming procurements?
Actually, it's been an issue, but out of things that happen, great things can happen, right? Mm-hmm. So our vendor outreach sessions, DHS has had vendor outreach sessions for years. Our former director, Kevin Boshears, came from Treasury, where he created vendor outreach sessions at Treasury. And so that came over to Homeland, and we haven't stopped for the last 16 years doing vendor outreach, right? So what happened? So when when COVID hit, we had maybe, I'll say 2 or 3 months of no VOS vendor outreach sessions. We do 10 of those a year. About 3 or 4 dedicated to socioeconomic groups only. We have one coming up in November for veterans and service-disabled veterans. So we do not hold them in April or September. And our sessions include, similar to what Brian said, from the components, the small business specialists, as well as large businesses. So we have about 6 or 7 or 8 large businesses that attend to look for, companies that are interested in subcontracting. So what did DHS do? So what did I do? First thing was, I was spazzing out a bit. It was like, what are we gonna do about VOS? So we had this tool called Teams. What was the first thing that we were not really using when we were going into the office every day? And so it became that system that we used we already had a contractor who does our scheduling for VOS. And so we switched quickly to Teams, where we were manually setting up meetings with those registered vendors. The registration piece never ended. It was, how do we connect with you now? How do we do that? Because these were in-person meetings, we love those. We did them once a month. It was a great time. And so now we had to switch to virtual. Virtual's kind of saved people a lot of money from coming. It kind of opened up more people to be able to experience VOS, even though we do have the issue of it, getting full, some quickly. Small business, and this is for everyone out in the audience, the small business sessions fill up very quickly. We're not seeing as many for the socioeconomic groups. So 8A programs, Hub Zone, please make sure that you look at our website for when our VOS sessions occur so you can register appropriately. So we've taken it to from Teams, to now our contractor is this fiscal year, we're working on something similar to, you just click on a link and you open up and you're talking to the person. So we're taking Teams out of it, because one of the issues is that DHS, like probably many agencies, have these different bureaus and components who have different IT configurations. So Teams was starting to be an issue with some of the, having that face-to-face contact. And so we are evolving our VOS. The last session for October with that link, the separate links went very well with every component. You have 1 or 2 like Secret Service where you just can't, nothing kind of works to come into that kind of face-to-face interaction or anything that they can click and open. But we're working through it, and I think it's been working well. It was a challenge at first, but we only probably lost 3 VOS sessions in early 2020, and then we've been rolling ever since. And so we still have VOS is very active and is a best practice, and we just continue to build on it being better, but being virtually better.
Thank you for that, Darlene. And because this question is so important, Denise, I want to go back, when you said you could your office introduces us to technical stakeholders. How are you managing that piece during the COVID world? How does that introduction and connection happen?
Well, I think we're in a state of transition, to be honest with you, and I'm experimenting with something that I feel really passionate about in terms of the vendor engagement. And so we heard one model that I think many of the OSDBUs have used for quite a bit of time. And that is the outreach sessions where they might be centered around a particular socioeconomic group or how to do business with our agency and the like. What I would like, and we've started to transition EPA into doing, is for our vendor engagement and outreach events to be really focused on matching businesses with opportunities. And so for the outreach events that you will see OSDBU host, it will be based on an examination of our forecast. We have now the infrastructure bill that hopefully will soon become a legislation that will be implemented and give agencies some additional appropriations. And for EPA, we're expecting a lot of additional contracting activity for that. And so as we speak, the agency officials are working on an implementation plan that identifies procurements that they anticipate. As soon as that process is complete, we're going to be examining that to see where the opportunities are. And we will host outreach events based on those opportunities and bring both the contracting and program officials to meet directly with the businesses as part of those outreach events. And so we're thinking that this is a better way to invest the limited resources we have so that we're matching the businesses with the programs and the opportunities. And how that will work as a logistics in practice, we're working the details out now. In the short term, it will continue to be virtual, but it will be a face-to-face conversation, not in person, but through the computer. And I think for many businesses, it will be probably very convenient because you can do it at the convenience of your office or home. And I will just make one footnote with respect to, because there are emerging businesses, and that is going to be an important pillar of the President's management agenda to ensure that we're bringing in new businesses. And they still will need a little bit of hand-holding to get accustomed to navigating the federal landscape. And so for those types of support, we're going to be relying on our field offices that are closer to businesses that are out in those regions where Antonio mentioned earlier are not seeing as many federal opportunities. And so we want to make sure they get prepared. So we have small business coordinators in the regions that will be conducting those types of one-on-one with businesses to make sure they're equipped to compete in the federal marketplace. So I hope that answered your question to give you a little bit of flavor of what's coming down the pike.
It did. So let me ask a follow-on question to you yourself. I've sat in many, and most of us, in many speed dating things, right? And I personally don't know if 10 people came to me in conference, I remember about nobody at the end of the day. And I suspect speed dating is a lot like that. So is that model that you're proposing more of the speed dating or a little variation?
I think it's a little variation, but I really, if we have time when we ask the questions, I would be really interested in hearing from our small businesses as to what you think would work best. From the research that we've done, and we had a listening session with small businesses, what we heard is they don't appreciate when we have these outreach and you get program officials just get up and talk generically about what their program does, and they don't find that as valuable. And so when we are connecting you with programs and contracting officials, what format is most convenient for you all? We try, small group tables when everybody gets to talk. Is one-on-one better? So I would be interested in hearing what works best for you as we define this plan going forward.
We'll certainly, I'll just ask a couple more questions
Okay,
and leave it
sure.
open to the floor
Yep.
because everybody has a perspective on what works and what doesn't. So, Brian, let me go back to you and quickly, could you tell us what contracting vehicle types are coming out of your agency now? I know you focused on HubZone earlier, but what are we looking at in the next 6 months to a year out of your agency so that we can prepare accordingly?
Okay, so great question. So as the team lead responsible for forecasting, I've already reached out to the small business program officers who reached out to the acquisition professionals who provided me with a list of their new forecast of opportunities. So that new list of forecast of opportunities, I've already reviewed that list for accuracy, and I will be posting that list out on to Treasury's public-facing website starting Monday. And it's kind of cool that, meeting with you all. So, the small businesses that are listening in on this panel discussion will get like a heads up. I mean, this is the first announcement that I'm giving to the small business community is that on Monday morning, you can go in and take a look at all of Treasury's new forecast of opportunities. Our website is similar to Darlene's. It's very user-friendly. You could use the sorts features. It's kind of easy to use and navigate. If there are any issues, the group can reach out directly to me. That's brian.watson@treasury.gov. I did a preliminary look at, the opportunities. There were a lot of opportunities available for the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. There were lots of opportunities available for the Bureau of Physical Services. Those opportunities, I started writing them down, and they range from janitorial services to IT maintenance to valuation services to disposal of waste to IT project management and program management to financial management and assistance to banknotes reviews. And so they were like kind of all over the place. So I just recommend that, the small businesses to go out and, take a look at the opportunities themselves. It's a wide scope. And as they continue to navigate and do their research, again, I mentioned the point of contact list where they can reach out to the Bureau of Small Business Specialists to get more insight and to possibly get a connection with the program manager.
Thank you, Brian. Darlene, let me leave you with my last question before we open the floor. I've talked about challenges we are facing as small businesses, but for you all on the procurement side, what challenges are you facing and how could we make it easier?
I think it depends upon, I'll be general in nature. It depends, I think, upon the agency. It depends upon the OSBU office. You have different levels of top-down leadership in different agencies as it relates to, how OSBUs are perceived, how they're staffed, how they are included in, some of the decision-making. Some of the issues are, there are a lot of things that come out that small business things that are happening that are very important. Decisions that need to be made with the OSBU, may be part of implementing or goals changing, but they're not part of the discussion. And so that's not at DHS, that doesn't happen a lot, but for some of my colleagues, that probably is an issue at some of the smaller agencies where, that inclusion isn't there. So you kind of have to bear with some of the OSBUs in agencies that you're interested in. That's not a NASA or DHS or VA. That some of our colleagues have different challenges when it comes to, their leadership and, being involved in the process. So that's one thing I'll say. Another thing I'll say, and I'll give you an example. I had a conversation yesterday with a company who DHS has a vehicle called TACOM 2, which is a vehicle that can be used for buying tactical equipment, communications equipment by several federal agencies. And so there are a lot of small businesses under there. There are, the ordering guide allows you to do set-asides, right? So, you know, I was talking to the company and he was like, well, Don, what can I do? I mean, I just feel bad making my own case. And I looked at him, we were on Teams and I'm like, are you serious? I said, you have to make your own case. You have to stand up for yourself. And he's a TACOM 2 contract holder. So that led to, well, you know what? You need to get all the TACOM 2 small businesses together and say, look, I don't think agencies are doing enough set-asides for us. That is allowed under this vehicle. So there's certain things that, you know, Denise mentioned that, you know, we'd like to see companies do that are not outside of the realm of standing up for yourself, as well as, you know, don't feel you're make the agency mad. We are mandated to support procurement opportunities. We have a federal acquisition regulation that procurement groups follow. And the OSDBUs are committed to following the Small Business Act, right? And so that's one thing that I preach all the time is, you know, come together as small businesses and present yourselves as what you see the issues are. And present those to whatever agency. If you feel comfortable just coming straight to the OSDBU, fine. You may have a point of contact in you know, in a component or someone who works there in leadership to say, look, you know, we're having this struggle, we need help. Nothing wrong with asking for help. And, you know, we are here to do that and here to help you. And so, you know, the takeaway is really just, you know, if you see something that you don't like or see something that's happening that we don't have eyes everywhere, we can't see everything. Please make sure that you let us know, because that is one of the roles of the OSDBU as advocates in different ways. We're advocates in different ways for small businesses, not just winning awards. You know, we're advocates in different space. So you have to let us help you do that. And so that's really my spin on that.
Thank you, Darlene, for that. But that triggered a very important question in my mind, and any of you, the three of you, take that. Sometimes we believe as small businesses that in the RFI stage, we can shape the vehicle it comes out on, right? Because you want to limit the competition and you feel that, okay, if I make a strong case in an RFI for a hub zone or a woman-owned or, you know, few limited number of companies are Alaskan Native or veteran disabled, but as you're trying to make a case for yourself, at least in the small business space, the belief is that we can shape that. Is that not true? Has the procurement office already decided by the RFI stage how they are going to, or what, you know, what set aside is going to be there or not for anyone?
I'll speak for DHS, okay, because I'm very involved in that entire process.
Okay.
And so, and I hate to say this, but part of it is the situation we're in right now, where we don't have money, time, it's true, and planning, resources. So one of the things I say, and I was a contracting officer for years, is that I've never worked on something where someone was already selected. There's no such thing as that in most, in any contracting, people are doing their job correctly. You know, what happens is a lot of times is when it's, if you're not tracking it or it just comes up, you go, oh, I'd like to, you know, I'm interested in that. It may be too late because it may be planning on both sides, government planning and whoever's interested not planning enough. And so what happens when it comes out, it's you know, who responds is probably not a surprise. Let me put it that way. But it's also not geared toward, let me, you know, I'm going to automatically not have a set aside. This is going to be unrestricted. At DHS, there's processes for that. So if you see a lot of things that are coming out unrestricted, it's because the market research has suggested that is how it should be. The problems that I have, that I see so many of these things, and I'm like, gosh, there's no small businesses responded to this RFI. If you look at some of the reports, it's like, well, what they responded wasn't, you know, that great. They didn't include this. They did, you know, and then I don't think there's not any that can do it. I don't think they may have responded or they may have seen it, or, you know, there's something missing here of why they aren't, you know, being able to provide a response. So if they do, we have this thing called a rule of two. And that means, you have to issue it as a set aside. Sometimes we do other things to accommodate, both large and small businesses, depending on the requirement, but small businesses have to be a piece of it. So it's, there's a process in place at every agency, Treasury, EPA, contracting officers have the duty. I even pull that same duty to schedule buys. I'm not in the belief, and it's not true, that the FAR Part 19 doesn't apply to schedules. That's always, they always like to run around and say that. That's not true.
It is true.
It applies to the schedule when it comes to bundling, size standards. And when you want to do a set aside, you have to follow the rules of the FAR Part 19 programs. So when you ever hear people say, oh, it doesn't apply to schedule, that's not true. And also, what I do a lot is, I have these conversations with contracting officers, and I say, well, what if you have a bunch of small businesses, whatever number, under schedule, what would incline you not to set that aside? You got to kind of bring the shame out of people and go, what sense does that make for you not to do that? Tell me. And they really don't have an answer. You can't go back to what doesn't apply. You have a duty to ensure maximizing small businesses in this procurement world we're in, federal procurement. And one of those, and any of those, is any of the things that I mentioned. And you have to just remind people of that. And so when you have a strong OSDBU office, when you have strong contracting people, when you have strong leadership, it kind of all flows together. And I'll tell you what happened this last year. So last fiscal year, the DHS small business obligation was over 38%. It's never been that high. We obligate about almost $8 billion to small businesses. And so a lot of the processes and changes that are taken in the last fiscal year and a little bit before that, we can see the evidence of that. A lot of it's training. A lot of contracting people are new. I'll say this, when I was a CO, a division director, small business probably wasn't the first thing we were taught. And how do you keep that momentum going to small business? So that's the other thing, training of acquisition staff. And it's in the FAR, but do we train on that like we should? Probably not. Sorry about my So I get very passionate about that because I think my CO hat comes on as well as my OSDBU hat is when we get into the set aside. But set asides and responding is how we get to the set aside. And great responses. Like Denise and Brian will say the same thing. You have to gather up your crew that you're competing against and say, look, we want this one. We need everybody to respond appropriately and with great information. If you don't do that, they just go somewhere else. And the big statement is, oh, well, small businesses can still respond. That's not the point of all this. We know that they can. They can still respond in unrestricted. Okay, I got it. That's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to make this box just for them or another socioeconomic group. So we probably all will plead with you all to respond as necessary. And if you can, and it gets expensive, we know it may be a time issue, but that is really what, the first things I talked about, time and planning are probably what it is the most.
Thank you for that. I want to open it up to the audience because I'm sure there are people like me who are bursting with questions. Anyone?
Good questions. Good questions.
Really? Smita, please.
Oh.
This is Smita Siddhanti with Endina. Thanks for the input. The question about RFI is very, very important.
Yeah, it's a important
because
one.
I understand that there are rules and there's all this, rule of two. But the time that the amount of RFIs that are coming our way, I mean, they are enormous, and the small businesses do not have the capacity to respond. So there's got to be some other mechanism. I mean, we've done this for 30 years? We've tried this experiment, and there is no way to win, because you can do whatever RFI, but that doesn't mean you do selectively, and most of people can talk about that. So somewhere government has got to figure this out, some other mechanism. this rule of two isn't just working. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Yeah, can I just respond
Yes,
quickly
please,
to that?
please.
Because you are so correct and you're preaching to the choir. So not to diminish what Darlene said, because she's absolutely right. If an RFI or sources sought goes out, please respond and do your best possible job. And we understand that your resources are limited, so it's tough. But when you don't respond, it makes our work so much harder. So that's number one. But I agree completely that the RFIs and sources sought as a market research tool are woefully inadequate. And in fact, that's one of the main reasons I'm pursuing the course in terms of how we will engage in vendors. Because what the Office of Federal Procurement Policy has said from OMB is that there's much more to identifying small businesses than relying on those two mechanisms that are static, the RFI and sources sought. And so just last week, I issued something that defined the different techniques for vendor resources that we're going to be using at EPA, so that rather than just looking at what the responses are in the RFI, we're bringing businesses in. And just a quick example that we did last year, and I don't know if any of the participants of that are in the audience, we heard from small businesses, which is the other thing that you guys need to do. If you are our eyes and ears out there, so you're helping to police the industry. So if you see something that doesn't look right, you need to let us know so that we can pursue it on your behalf. But we heard from some small businesses that said, you know, we're hearing that this requirement is coming out. Can you try and see if you can make it 8A, not just a small business set aside? So socioeconomic restrictions. And we said, that's a great idea. We called up the program office, and what we did was we called in and brought in a number of 8A and other socioeconomic businesses to talk with the program. So that was part of the market research that they did to find out, well, can they really perform, and should we go ahead and restrict it even further to a socioeconomic category? In the end, it ended up going small business, but I will tell you, the 8A firms that participated one-on-one and shared what their approach was to the requirement was invaluable. And so those are the type of things that I think we need to advocate more broadly, that the programs are not exclusively relying on just sources sought and RFIs for their market research tool. So I don't know if that was kind of the direction you were going, or you had other ideas.
Who's winning?
Can I just add a brief comment?
Yes.
So I agree 100% with what my counterparts has just said. One of the things I have been charged with was doing compliance reviews, you know, annually or biannually. So I would actually go back to our program, our small business program offices within the 11 Treasury bureaus, and we would actually review contracting documents, market research, and RFIs and all that good stuff. So as my counterparts speak, you know, I'm going back in my mind and agreeing with them. However, one of the things that I did find out was that when the small businesses, you know, provide their information in the RFIs or provide their proposal information, they may not all the time include all the information that is needed. But me, with having a background in IT program and project management, I would recognize that, okay, this organization can really fulfill this requirement. They have the core competencies and the knowledge experts there. They just need to have a little bit more information. My issue was that the contracting officers could reach back out as a follow-up to get this information, and they don't.
That's a good point.
That's the issue.
That's an excellent
you know,
point.
If
That's
you're
a
really,
good point.
if I'm the contracting officer on the other end, I would pull that out and I would get my two. So it gets real subjective. So that's one of the things I just wanted to add. And then the last thing I wanted to add to small businesses, sometimes you may want to partner or collaborate efforts to strengthen your proposals. That way it's more convincingly to the contracting officer.
Excellent points.
Yeah.
So the question I had.
And just to add to that, DHS, like all of my colleagues have said, DHS, that RFIs and sources sought are one of the tools in the toolbox, even though it's one of the ones that is very powerful because, you know, sam.gov is where everything should be, most things are posted and, wide dissemination. But GHS also has industry days. We tailor our market research to the procurement, the size of the procurement, the type of the procurement, et cetera. And so we also have the Procurement Innovation Lab, the PIL, that comes up with, some innovative techniques of evaluation as well as innovative techniques of market research. So that in addition to, we have a lot of tools in the toolbox to use as far as market research is concerned.
Thank you for that. My organizers are saying I'm totally out of time. I'm going to request Denise to stay here for a bit backstage, and I'll leave the stage for the other speakers. Brian and Darlene, thank you so much for your time. I learned so much. And Denise, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so
And
much.
thank you very much. We knew going into this panel that this is going to be one of the most powerful panels, and we know the small businesses have a lot of questions, but you know what? Thank you so much for your participation. So thank you, Pallavi.
Thank you, Manish.
Okay, thank you so much. Before we break out for, we are pretty much already 15 minutes late at this point, and the problem we are having is that we have over 60 chapters watching us virtually. So as we shift the time, that's where the thing is going wrong. But let me just quickly say that the whole purpose of today was SBA engagement. We are very happy to report that Jack, who's here with us, has gotten